So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce to you our lovely speakers, two gentlemen, two brothers. As I said, sitting in Alabama, we've got Brock Sellers and Jamie Sellers. Actually, I'm going to cheat now because I've got a hard copy, I've just remembered. So Brock Sellers is a clinical social worker specialising in the field of child welfare, foster care and adoption. Brock is presently the training coordinator for Children's Aid Society of Alabama, focusing on supporting and educating foster and adopted families and the professionals who serve them. And then Jamie Sellers is a 1999 graduate of social work, a licensed private practice social worker, who's been sharing the three principles for over 17 years. Over the years, he attended numerous Sydney Banks conferences and received training and guidance from pioneers in the field. So he and his brother Brock are pioneers in sharing this understanding in Alabama and have conducted training nationally for numerous service agencies, schools, mental health providers, and professional conferences. So welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
To have you with us today. So our topic today is the impact of social work in community. And as I've just been reading a little bit of your bios, I said people can find out more about you on the website. You can find your full bios there. So that's what we're going to be talking about, is the social work in community. So I don't know who wants to start, find it out between you, but as I always like to start these sessions to give people a little insight into, apart from the official stuff, you're a little bit about your journey and how you've ended up here on the Tele-Summit. Who would like to Jamie?
Well, I think since I was born first, I'll start. How about that?
There you
go.
Great.
So I realized that for a minute there, I thought, well, if she doesn't read the bio, and I guess I could remember my bio, you know.
I'm glad you found it.
Yeah, I am glad you found it. But funny enough, there were some things that I didn't put in there that I probably should have. So so for about 17, 18 years, I worked as a social worker in a psychiatric hospital, focusing mostly with children and adolescents. Also led a group once a week with adults on the acute psych unit, and did a lot of teaching and sharing in that context. And then about a little over a year ago, I got the position as the director of a residential treatment center for boys ages 6 to 14 who have been labeled as severely emotionally disturbed. So these kids have suffered significant abuse and trauma, and their behaviors haven't allowed them to be in a regular home or school setting. So so about a year ago, I started doing that for Glenwood, and that's my day job. And then on the side, I speak and share any chance I get, and anytime someone will listen. So so that's a little more about as far as my experience goes in social work. And I think that, you know, as I was reflecting on what I'd like to share with people out there, either who aspire to be in this field or who are in it, I was reflecting on what has understanding done for me in this work. And the thing that really just stood out to me was the fact that I can see someone who is really suffering on the outside. I can see people who are really struggling with their life, their mental health. I mean, people who are considered the most severely disturbed individuals, you know, on the spectrum, so to speak. And I can see them as healthy, below the what you see in front of you. So it's almost like it provided X-ray vision for me to see through the mess to the health and the resilience and the wisdom and the common sense that they have. And being able to see that firsthand helped me to be discourage proof. I don't. I have a confidence about working with people. I'm just not intimidated by how severe the case is, how much they've been suffering, and for how long. And that has been a real gift and has really kept me from getting burned out, to be honest. So that's kind of the overarching thing that I feel understanding the principles and looking in this direction has done for me. Working in the mental health side of social work. So that's a little bit about me, just to start off. I'll let Brock share a little bit, and then we can go from there.
Yeah. So I was exposed. I started out I was exposed to the understanding back around 2000, and Jamie can share more about how he got introduced to it. He was the one that shared it with me, and I had an insight. I was in college, and I was at the mall, and I was always I dreaded standing in line for things. I didn't have patience for that kind of thing, and so I would avoid going to a place that I really wanted just because there was a long line, and so I would settle because I couldn't handle being in line. And so he'd been sharing with me. There was a book I was reading at the time, You Can Be Happy No Matter What, and by Richard Carlson. And there was a thing in there about living moment to moment. And I just remember noticing all of a sudden I was at the mall, and all of a sudden the line had passed and I was next in line. And I remember being blown away at how I didn't experience being impatient. I was looking around. I noticed the Christmas lights. I noticed the music. I noticed people. And then in that moment, it was like I went fast forward in time, and I'm sitting there about to order. And that's when I realized, like, wow, life is not what I thought it was. And that I don't have to experience what I think I have to experience. So it just woke me up to that. And that was just the first little insight I had, but it was big for me. And then at the same time, I was in school to be a social worker, and I started seeing the implications for that and seeing how it played out in communities and seeing the work of Roger Mills and others. And it was fascinating to me. And so I've been fortunate enough to have been learning about this and sharing through my journey as a social worker. So I've sort of been doing it concurrently. I started out in child welfare, did that for about 6.5 years, and was a frontline social worker as a foster care worker for a few years. And then I would do home studies assessments, stuff for court, worked with families for a few years after that, doing child abuse and neglect assessments, investigations, essentially. And that was what I did. It was a state job and frontline worker. So I did that for about 6.5 years. And like I said, concurrently, I was learning about the principles and starting to get development from various groups and people, and was connected with Pransky and Associates and started receiving development from them and shadowing the work they were doing in business and the corporate world, and did that for a couple of years. And that was, it was really cool, but it was sort of like corporate social work is the way I saw it at the time. And it was sort of a new thing, doing this work in business. So then I joined back up into child welfare back in 2010, and now I'm in a nonprofit where we work with foster and adoptive families, like was said in the bio, and I do training for therapists and social workers and agencies, anybody who works with that population, and sort of sharing what I understand and try to point people deeper in that regard. So that's sort of, in a nutshell, my journey. And yeah, so yeah, that's that. It's in a nutshell.
Yeah, and it occurred to me after I finished that I didn't even really share how I was introduced to this.
Yeah, you want to answer the question that?
Oh, there's a question. Yeah.
Did you not answer the question, Jamie?
Her question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Okay. Yeah, I missed.
Go ahead.
Sorry, my British sense of humour.
Yeah. Well, so it was funny because I had a great childhood growing up, but I had this thing that I was constantly, it had this grass is greener syndrome where it was hard for me to really enjoy something because there was always something that could be better. And I always wanted to be looking forward to something. And whenever I got that something, there was something else. I always thought there was something else. And of course, it affected my ability to focus and to be productive, but it really affected my relationships. And so I just had this mindset that once I was in a relationship for after a period of time and the excitement wore off, I started wondering, well, is there something better? And so I just went to the bookstore. I had this sort of a seeker mentality and found the book You Can Be Happy No Matter What by Richard Carlson. And there was a line in there about the present moment. And I was going through a tough time personally. And I remember it hit me really hard that right now I'm upset because I'm thinking 6 months ahead of now. And I just started laughing. And from that point, I started noticing how much life happened in the moment and how often I'd leave it. And so what was funny is I was already a social worker working in a psych hospital, but it wasn't until like a year or two later that it occurred to me that this might be applicable in terms of working with people. And so I'll never forget, I ran to the psychologist at the hospital, and I had another book and said, this is it. This is the, I think it was Missing Link, maybe by Sydney Banks. And I said, this explains everything. And I didn't understand why she was looking at me strange. I was quite evangelistic about it, I think, early on. And but it really affected me personally. And then I started learning how to apply it professionally. And that led me to meeting some amazing people in the community over the years, and from all walks of life and all disciplines. And so from that point, the learning just keeps going. And so it's a lot of learning about how to navigate the system, because the system isn't always kind to the message that we have to offer. It sometimes flies in the face of what people are doing. And so learning to navigate that has been a challenge at times, but just knowing that understanding is always there, and that there's this home base I can always turn to, has just really, insulated me from a lot of the unnecessary headaches of being in the system. So that's a little more about how I got to this point. I still tend to, I still fall into my old habits from time to time with the whole grass being greener deal, but not nearly as much as I used to.
Mm. That's really, thank you for recognizing sometimes I forget myself and I'm getting engrossed in people's stories.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, we'll move on.
I mean, at least I didn't delete my bio,
I know.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring that up there, but
yeah, you're not going to let me forget that, are you? Yeah, funny. So social workers, we have had a couple of, well, at least one I can think of so far on the Tele Summit, talking a little bit about how work and talking about frontline workers. And I think we're talking about social work and how important it is for frontline workers to have an understanding of the principles. And you mentioned the system, Jamie. You said, you talked about navigating the system. And I know we talked about that before, didn't we? About how, yeah, I mean, that's where you said you've been reflecting on the question about how this understanding makes the work that you do different. So I'd love to hear more about that. In, having an understanding of the inside out nature of life is what we're talking about, right? And then how that's different. Mm-hmm. How that's, just to start off with, how different how that has made the work that you do.
Yeah. Yeah, because I had to be, I was on treatment teams in the hospital. I worked very closely with psychiatrists, nurses, other therapists, and oftentimes, we're speaking a different language. And for a long time, I would get sort of uncomfortable when I would hear things that I didn't believe in, or I would get, um, I would get a little self-righteous about the fact that I know the truth and they don't, um, and I wondered why nobody wanted to listen to me. What's up with that? But one thing that I found to be really helpful was when I realized that it's not the same ball game. We're not trying to. It's not an approach. It's not the same thing as, okay, you have this way of helping people. We're going to show you a different way to help people. It's an understanding, and so from that standpoint, it helped me to see the principles in action, even in other approaches that are outside in approaches. It helped me to see that there are that this wisdom, this intelligence behind life is working, even when someone's using a technique, and it just helped me to not be so concerned about what they were up to. And it also helped me to realize that when I had that reaction, when I had that need to be right, need to prove that I've got the right way, that was a lack of understanding myself. That was me essentially going outside in my understanding of this. And so I got a lot more comfortable learning about or being around professionals who are talking a different language. And I got better at speaking a language that wouldn't set them off or that wouldn't close them off, and really kept really made the language down to earth and non-threatening, and whereas most of the time they would agree with me, even though I knew that they weren't really hearing exactly what I was saying. So that made a big difference for me working in a team where it was a very much a medical disease model focus.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there, Jamie. I've come, and it's really interesting that you talk about that, because just recently, I run a meetup group with a friend here, and sometimes that, obviously people come to these meetup groups and they don't know anything about the principles, and they start. We were talking about love this month because it's February, so we talk about love, and of course everybody has a different idea about particularly self-love. And somebody in the group says, "Oh, I don't believe in self-love," and then you've got, then you can hear the sort of the crossfire where they're missing each other, like your ears closed, and so I do my best to stay as open and present with people, exactly as you're saying, to meet people where they are and hear what they're hearing, because being dismissive of somebody else's way of seeing the world is not helpful in terms of connection and helping them hear something new. Like that's what I've come to learn as I'm going along, because I used to be very evangelistic as well, and I know that's really common with this understanding. People come in and they just want to tell everybody, and this is the way it is, and
well, people are very religious about their therapy approaches. They're they spend a lot of money, a lot of time learning it. They've read a lot, and they're very wedded to this way of doing things. And so you don't just show up at a church and start preaching something that's the opposite of the congregation. You're not going to last very long. So I think just that's something, that awareness has helped.
Yeah, I get that. How about you, Brock? Is that the same for you?
It is. It's one of the things that I realized over time is that we're really, it's not like it's outside in versus inside out. It's a lot of mixed paradigm. That's really where the field is mixed paradigm right now. So part of it's outside in, but then the second half is but how do we help people with their own thinking and to navigate? So they're looking at both and they get them confused and that kind of thing. So it's really, I sort of see myself as trying to build a bridge between the two and help provide simplicity to the complexity that we're facing. So a lot of times it would look like to me when I was, especially after returning from teaching the principles during the day, all day, that's what I did for a living, to going back into child welfare. And it was, I sort of felt like I knew it and I knew the answer and I wanted to just tell them. And I thought that it would be simpler than it was. And then it reminded me, which is a core value in social work anyway, is that, you start out where they are. So if it's a client or if it's a coworker, a colleague or someone, you still have to listen and have the humility enough to be where they are and find out where are they seeing it and where are they getting hung up. So they're seeing it as, seeing it one way. How do they understand it? I think that's one of the things that when I was reflecting on this was, how does this help me? Well, it's helped me redefine the problems that we see with people. So what the presenting problem to the client is when they come forward it doesn't matter who the therapist is and their modality, they know that, just because the client feels like this is their problem, that's not necessarily the true problem. Well, in the same way, the way that I see things, the way that I understand what people are up against is a little bit different. So sharing from that and help simplify all the complexity they're dealing with, it really, it kind of gets you on the same page. You get aligned a lot quicker. The details don't matter as much. It's like, okay, what's the essence of what's going on here? And you can really quickly be on the same page pretty fast with what's the problem here. So a child is acting out and putting holes in the wall and they're having all these disturbing type behavior, and the parent is just, they're losing it. And some people see it as, well, I've got a child who has a problem. We need to support the child. And what my question is okay, what is this parent, what's going on with the parent? The child's problem is not really what the presenting problem is. So it's like, let's get closer to, okay, this parent is really struggling. Why is the parent struggling? What is that about? Now that's all content, but what we're doing is we start from the content, and you can quickly get down to what's the essence of what's happening here. And instead of just starting out with, it's just thought, and that we're spiritual beings and, we just don't realize it. Well, that's true, but that's not relevant to anybody who's really struggling. They're not interested in that typically. So it's kind of like, okay, well, how can I communicate with them to where we can connect, and then we can take them further. So I think that the problems look different that we're facing. The solutions look different as well, the way we go about. So that would maybe be how we diverge. But ultimately, it's helped with confidence in that, one, no matter what somebody is facing, no matter the duration that they've had this problem, the severity, the frequency of their problems, whatever it is, that's not relevant when it comes to the power of thought. And one of the ways that I've heard it once, I think Jamie Smart said that, thought doesn't operate under the laws of physics. So when you're talking about insight and realizations and life-changing things that can happen within the mind, it doesn't matter how long physiologically you've even had a thought and how ingrained it is into your psyche. It's a house of cards, So I think knowing that, it makes our lives a lot easier as clinicians, as a helper. It changes the scope of it just changes the ball game. So now we're in a different ball game, and that's refreshing for people. I think people know intuitively that there is part of them that is not harmed. There is part of them that has not harmed others. That there's a piece of them that is pure, that is in there, that is clouded, and they may have a hard time seeing it or believing it, but ultimately I think they have a sense of it. And so we just try to point that out with people, and it ends up, it's very helpful. So I think that what that does for me in a setting where not everybody is seeing it the way I see it, but they do see that, you know what, we're in it to serve people. We're in it to help people with their suffering. And if you get aligned at that level with people, the nature of social work, what it is to be of service, to put others before yourself. Well, we all are wanting to do that. And so I think pointing in that direction aligns people at that level, and then it makes the bridge building a lot easier. So it's kind of like you start there, then you're going to be way better off than if you start at techniques and strategies, because that just you're barking up the wrong tree. I mean, and we know from experience. I mean, just we've done it, we've tried it, and it just and every time we're like, wow, why did I do that again? You know, that was a waste of time. And so I don't know if is that making sense? Are you
Absolutely. To me, it makes perfect sense. I was just pondering, thinking, well, how refreshing is that? In terms of what the traditional model is, if you like, of helping, in a way, helping people in distress, helping people, the social work type work. I don't know about in the States, but I know in the UK it has, social work's doesn't have a good reputation. People, social workers are not loved people per se. I don't know how it is in the States, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, to go in and with a whole different, to me that sounds like a very different feeling. You're coming from a very different place, and people pick up on that, don't they? That's the
absolutely.
They do. They sense it, that because they can sense judgment, and they sense, and they're also they're in fear. They're living in their worlds, and our role is to knock on their door and say, hey, we've received some concerns reported about how you're doing life, and it's affecting other people. It might be affecting children and their safety, and we may need to intervene. And even just talking to them about that's an intervention in and of itself. So they're in this fight or flight fear mode, and we're trying to serve, but it's an uphill battle. And so I think innocently the social workers who I think that everyone is, they're wanting to be of service, but the way they're defining the problem, the way they understand what's in front of them, and then the way they see the solutions playing out and how things need to happen, that's where we can end up innocently. I think we can do damage and get the reputations that we receive, and have things go south really quickly if we don't know what's happening within us. If we don't know what's happening within them, then you can really make matters tough for families. And so and I've done that as well. We've all done that. So I think that's one of the things that I love about this understanding, is that it helps people become better helpers. And ultimately, no one wants to do harm, and no one wants to create more trauma or adversity for a family that's already had a lot of trauma. And so, and that's the dilemma that they're facing in an outside-in mentality, is that how do we help without causing more problems? And we want to say, hey, well, I've got the solution right here. Well, they have to see it, and we have. So how do we get them there?
Yeah, kind of a silly metaphor, because I thought we were going to get through the whole thing without using a metaphor.
No.
We usually overdo the metaphors. I think we did like 58 the other day at a talk. We counted up. I just had this image of these people are playing basketball, but they don't realize they can use their hands, and so they're playing it like soccer players, and every once in a while they would score. Some of them are really good with their feet, and they were able to score, and then we're sitting in the stands telling them, you can use your hands. Of course, they're not listening, but once they realize, like, oh, you can use your hands, that makes it way easier. And it's kind of like that. It's like it's just realize, not getting so caught up and not having so much respect for the nature of the suffering itself, and seeing behind that it's just a misunderstanding, and that you're just, if you're going in the wrong direction, no matter how fast you're going, if you stop going in the wrong direction, it will help you. And so just pointing them in a direction, and other approaches do help people. They really do. And there are social workers who have that feeling, that come from that space, and they're really helpful. And we just see this as a simpler, more direct route to what they're looking for than going the scenic route, so to speak. So so it's that, just knowing, as Sid said, that you're only one thought away, really. And it's even people with schizophrenia, they're a thought away from having a different relationship to their experience of their symptoms. And I've seen that firsthand. I used to do groups, as I said earlier, and I'm on the side. I do sleight of hand magic tricks.
I did read that on your bio.
Doesn't work on webcam, so no questions about doing magic tricks. Anyway, and I share this story a lot, but I would go into group, and you've got a group of patients who are, they're on a locked psych unit. Some of them, maybe half of them, are there involuntarily. There are people there who have recently made suicide attempts. There are people who are maybe detoxing off of alcohol. And so I would go in the room and have my deck of cards, and I would start off doing some magic tricks for them. And within like 30 seconds, they're up on the edge of their seat. They're laughing. They're cutting up. They're joking. And there have been times when I had to tell them to keep it down, because y'all are having too much fun. This is a psych unit. You're not supposed to have fun. Of course, they would laugh at that too. And so, and then I could say, look, your situation hasn't changed. You're still locked here. You have these circumstances, and yet you're feeling joy. How is that possible? And for them to experience that, for me to see that, first off, when I saw that, I was sold. It was like that. It's true. They do have mental health, because this person was talking to himself a minute ago, and now he's clear-headed and has a sense of humor. Now, am I saying that he's not? Of course he goes back into his thinking. Without the understanding, that's what happens. But just seeing that it's right below the surface. It didn't take a lot of work. They didn't have to mentally, they didn't have to do mindfulness meditation to get there. It naturally floated to the surface without any effort on their part. And that was the evidence. And seeing that, it gave me confidence that anybody can experience well-being, even locked in on a psych unit. And so that gives you confidence that you can pretty much face anybody, and point people in this direction. And it doesn't always help everybody, but it can help anybody. And that's been my experience.
Mm. Yeah, mine too. That's so true, isn't it? It doesn't seem to help. Not everybody hears it. That's it. What I put it down to they're not ready for some reason to
Mhm.
hear it. They're just run in the opposite direction. That's happened to me lots of times. Yeah. What I was hearing and what you were saying, Jamie, just now is that it's curious, isn't it? It's so overlooked because you said, that people, you said it floats to mental health floats to the top. And it's like we miss that all the time, don't we, in humanity? Like, because the initial reaction would be, why did that happen? How did that happen? Well, that's our natural default setting. We don't have to do anything to make that happen, right? How come we all overlook that? It's
Yeah, that's what they would say. I would ask them, well, how are you guys feeling? How is it possible that you're feeling okay right now? And they would dismiss it and say, oh, well, you just distracted me from my problems. You just got my mind off of reality. And then then I would point out that in actual fact, you're experiencing reality now. And when you start getting in your head, that's when the suffering kicks in. That's when you've left it. And so, because it's that experience of the present moment of that well-being and that resilience, and there's so many different words for it, but it's not something that they consciously did. It was something that presented in that moment of quiet.
Well, and there's a lot of research out now about resilience, and that's one of the new buzzwords in the trauma field and everything. And one of which there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of understanding it, but one of the things that struck me, there's an article I read about vicarious resilience is what it's called, but just the phenomenon of how it's helpful to you when you see other people who are overcoming adversity, what that does for people. Why do we like to hear other people's stories where they faced hardship and they overcame? Like, what does that do for our spirit, and why? So one of the things that they were pointing out is that if you want to bring this out in your staff, one of the things that you do, and this was leadership in the social work setting, one of the things to do is to point it out to your staff when they are resilient, and then have them point it out when their clients are. And that was a quote strategy for helping people be more resilient. And it's really, all that is just becoming more aware of something that was already happening. It's not, you're not actually doing anything other than just having the eye for it and looking for it. So I think if I was wanting to know how to find gold, I would ask somebody and they'd say, well, this is where to look for it and this is how to look for it. But it's already there. Like, it's not like you manufacture gold, you find it, but you have to know how to look for it and where to look for it. And I think that's sort of what we're in the business of doing now, is that we're not having to construct people's well-being anymore. Like, that's not our job. And I think that's freeing for people when they hear that they don't have to do that themselves, and that's not the therapist's job. That's not a manager. You don't have to do that in your staff. It's not a building operation. It's a mining, as a lot of people refer to it. So it's already there, and we wake up to it more and more. We notice it, and then the fact of noticing it reconnects us with our mission of service. So I think that, it's inspiring to see that life is unfolding for people. And that's what this is. It's a life-giving venture to point people toward the life that is inside of them, that is trying to come out, that wisdom, that common sense is right there. You bring that out, and then you just point it out, and it surfaces up without any effort of their own. And then they can make wiser decisions. And, we so often try to help people make wiser decisions, but the way we go about it is where we get into trouble. And reminds me of a situation where when I was doing the child abuse and neglect cases, and I was out at a home, and this mother, she was a young mother, and she had like 3 kids, and her house was just a mess. It was a disaster, and there was some supervision questions. Mom was real scattered, and the house was just, it was a disaster. So I talked to her about it, kind of the logic of like, what am I doing? What is my role, and what am I not doing? And she was so fearful that we were going to remove the children. That's naturally what all families, they interface with an investigator. That's just the first natural fear. So we talked about what really needed to happen with the cleanliness of the home and why. So she was so nervous about, well, when are you going to come back out and do a spot check? Are you going to announce it, or are you not going to announce it? She was just so stressed about when I was going to come back. And it occurred to me, it was like, oh, she thinks that my job is to come and make sure her house is clean. And that's not my role. My role is to help make sure that children are safe and supervised. And that's really all that her job is. It's not about when am I coming back to check the home. It was about her protecting her children and keeping the home safe and sanitary for her children. So I realized that, and I pointed that out for her. I said, don't worry about when we're coming. It doesn't matter when we're coming back. We may not come back. I'm just like, really don't worry about whether we're coming back or not. Just you focus on keeping your children safe and keeping your home clean for them. It doesn't have to be spotless. It just needs to be sanitary and safe. And she was it was so freeing for her. Like, oh, so you're not trying to catch me, or if I was we would do drug screens, like sometimes they think we're trying to catch them using. We're not, we're just trying to keep you accountable and know that children are safe in your presence. Like, that's what we need to know. And this helps us. So I'm not trying to catch her having her house messy. I want her to know the point. What's the point? So anyway, that was really helpful for her. And it wasn't a problem after that. We did do some visits after that were unannounced, and it was fine because she got the essence of it. And I think that's the kind of thing that happens from this understanding. It's not a strategy. It's just a way of understanding things, and then helping them see that. And they become wiser. And then our job, I feel like our job is done. And so that's something that Jamie and I have been really excited about, is being able to share this with other workers and agencies, clinicians, so that we're helping. Hopefully it will spread in terms of just pointing to something that's more true than what we see.
That's cool. When you say you're sharing this with other clinicians, other agencies, can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that might be an interesting point for people to hear about. How do you do that, and how is it received? How does the way that they work change? I know you've shared a little bit of yours, but I'm curious about the other people. For other people, how does that work? Because it's different for everybody, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I've noticed is that, like, in my current role, it helps me. In my current role, my job is to help educate and support adoptive families, foster and adoptive families, and then also the professionals who serve them. So all of our services, all of our training is geared toward that population and serving that population. So it's not like I have a training that's called the 3 principles. We actually I infuse the understanding in all of the various other trainings that we have. So they want to understand lying or cheating or acting out behavior, or maybe it's stealing. All of these behaviors that people are struggling with these children, or understanding trauma. How can I take that and point people deeper? And I think that as long as you're not taking too big of a leap, you can gradually get people deeper. I've tried to take that leap and fallen off several times. And so I realized that I really need to start more where they are, and we're kind of gradually bringing them along. So I don't think that I don't know if people would even say that, well, I don't know if this is fair to say, but I'm a principle-based practitioner. Everything I do is from that understanding. But I may not use the language in the same way, and it may not look like it to an outsider. And but it's a matter of can I point to the truth in something and have them have a little more light shine on what's true versus what they think is true. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that's helpful. That's helpful, Brock. Thank you. Yeah.
How we go about it, Jamie? You want to talk about some of the ways?
Do we have a question, or is that just that little
There's
icon?
It's a comment just come in. I didn't know you could see that actually. From Karen Miller Williams, who says, "Love getting to know Jamie and Brock. Such beautiful stories of this understanding in communities far and wide." So,
well, thank you.
You just wanted to,
Karen.
yeah, a nice comment about
it. It was just an answer. It wasn't a question. It was
a
It
comment.
was the A, not the
okay.
Q. Okay. Yeah. So it's so funny. I thought so. My work in the hospital for many years, I discovered that the more invested I was in trying to convert everybody, the less open they were. Imagine that. And I had my little brochures I'd leave in the bathroom. Kidding. And then when I had stopped being so invested and I just was sharing what made sense to me, they tend to be more open. But it's funny, a year ago when I got this position and I was going to be in charge, so to speak, and I was like, oh, this is great. So now I can train everybody the way I want to. I can have more control over what we're teaching and how we're doing things. And it really all it really means is that they're going to humor you a little more. they'll be polite and they'll listen, but it's really, again, when it comes to trying to present this as a way of doing things, it can be very difficult. But so I try to stay out of, I try to assume that once you start to get the understanding and see the truth in it, it'll naturally make sense to you to do things differently. And so trying to get people to do things differently without the understanding, it just won't make sense to them. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes I'm more patient than others, but it is you do discover creative ways to talk about it without sounding a certain way, a way that throws them off. There's language. You start learning how to speak the language in a way that connects and resonates with them, instead of sticking with your 3P language. You get better at that. I used to be real uncomfortable early on with, we're in the Bible Belt, and so there may be things that people could take offensive or take the wrong way and get insecure about. And but it is really, my understanding of the principles really enhanced my my spiritual life, and it helped me to feel confident talking with people at that level as well. So so I think the more you start to see it for yourself, which I know people probably get sick of hearing that, but the more that you see that community begins within you, to bring in the theme, the more you just naturally share in a common sense way that people are more likely to listen to, instead of trying to convert people from an outside in to an inside out mindset. Because let's face it, I mean, even all of us on this call, I mean, we're we're outside in all the time during the day. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, Sheila, you went outside in probably for a minute there when the bio was off the screen,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
you know, and so it was like in real time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, with being humble about the fact that we're all, I mean, you know, Sid would go outside in too. So that's just the nature of the game. But I think as long as we keep pointing and looking, you know, one thing's for sure is they won't see it if you're not pointing there, or maybe they will, but they won't realize what they're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
They're more likely to see something if you point. And so I'll tell my staff, you know, I don't expect you to see what I see. I hope that you'll look in the same direction as I look. You know, and so, you know, because if you look in the same direction, you'll share it the way it makes sense to you.
Mm. It seems to be, doesn't it, that some people need pointing, need guidance, need more guidance. The guidance, I mean the pointing.
Mm-hmm.
There's some people like Sydney Banks, who had the experience. He just woke up, and it seems like he didn't, but he actually did, because something was said, wasn't it, just before he had that experience. It's you know, when you were talking, Brock, earlier on about the gold, what struck me about that, you know, the metaphor of people hunting such a, yeah, but you have to know the gold's there in the first place to even look for it.
Yeah.
And that for me was the missing piece. Is that I had no idea that I had this default inner wisdom, this, you know, the default of who we really are. I had no idea I had this innate well-being until it was pointed out to me. And then I had to go and explore for myself and find out if that was true, because I wasn't going to believe somebody else. I needed to really experience it for myself to know that it was true. But I had no idea that I could even try and experience it, if you like, without somebody pointing that out to me and telling me that it was actually there. Mm-hmm. It's like we need to know the gold's there before we can actually start looking for it, right? Yeah.
Well, and one of the things that's interesting, and I don't want to sound elitist, but I might, and if so,
but you're okay with it,
you know, you can send your hate mail to bestseller. No, but I think that in the field, if you're talking about social work, okay, and the service fields in general, so. You know, in most fields they try to serve people, but people that they've committed their lives to putting others first, we'll say, and whether it be education or whatever, they have a sense of this connection already. That there's a sense of that place inside of them that wells up, that fills where they're getting their cup filled from. And otherwise they wouldn't be interested in the field. You know, they wouldn't say, I want to do this for a career, or I want to go to school to learn about this, or I want to be the best. I want to, you know, serve others. Like if you don't already have a sense of that, then it doesn't make sense to pick a service field. So we have that going for us, because it's a context that the people are familiar with, of that feeling of loving other people, and that feeling of humility, that feeling of connection to something bigger. I think that really all we're doing is pointing people to that they're already got a feel for it, and we're reminding them that they have this and that they've accessed it every day, and that it's really the heart of what you're about, and why you know, if you ask people what's their why, going into people's whys and like why they would do this for a living, and they really reflect on it, you're getting to the same essence of what we're pointing to. And then you say, okay, now that is what we're talking about. And they're like, oh, you know, and they get choked up thinking about it, because there's that spiritual oneness that happens within us when we are totally giving of ourselves. We fall out of our conceptual, we fall into that true piece of ourself, and then from that is when we're able to truly serve. And so this is sort of like it's another implication for this understanding, is that it insulates and protects from the stress and the burnout, even though it is a really hectic, stressful field. And you ask people that are not in the field, and they say, "Oh, I couldn't do that." I mean, you tell people you're social worker, they're like, "Ugh," you know. And I think, but this helps you say that with confidence and with certainty and without there's no wavering. Like, this is what I'm doing, and I love it. And people say I couldn't do it, and I tell people, "Nah, you'd be surprised." Now, given what you understand now, maybe it'd be hard, but it's kind of like if you knew about what I'm sharing with people, what I see about this, then I think you could. I think you'd be surprised. And so I think it helps with bridging the gap a little better when you point people to their why in this field, because that's their touchstone, or their that's the right word, because they resonate. People resonate with that, and they love that, because it's like that's what they're about. That's what I want to do. That's why I'm on this planet. A lot of times people say. So yeah, starting there, then you can take steps together a little easier.
So I love that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, and if the payback we get, and I joke, that we're not in this for the money, social work, but there is a payback, and as Brock was saying, it's that feeling that you get when you're in that service, when you're in that state, when you're not, it's not about you, and if you're not getting that, then yeah, you will feel burned out, because you'll feel like, hey, this isn't what I signed up for. I got into this because I wanted that service feeling. And that feeling is what the principles have done for me. Is it's allowed me to realize that feeling is there regardless of policy changes and paperwork and difficult clients. That feeling is always there regardless. And that's what helped me to work on a psych unit for 17 years without burnout.
That's amazing, an amazing feat in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. I keep waiting for a check, for that, like some kind of award or something. Yeah, isn't there some kind of like lifetime achievement award for 17 years? Yeah, exactly.
Well, you've got some fans. I'm telling you, you've got another comment here from Annie, and I believe it's Annie I know in the UK. She says, I love the idea of falling out of the conceptual and already seeing in this direction. That's so true in education. Yeah, it must be Annie I know. Thank you both for your wisdom. And then there was another comment in the chat box I saw come in and said, I love hearing this. Meeting others where they are is such a great place to start. Lovely hearing Brock and Jamie. You might not have a plaque, but you've got some fans. So
she's waiting on her check from me, I think.
You paid her to say that, did you?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'll say this too. We just did a talk at a conference last week on ethics in social work, and we were talking about sort of what's behind unethical behavior. Why would it make sense to have an ethics code in any field and all of that? And I was looking at it, and for social work, one of the first things was about one of the values and one of the principles is service. And the first sentence is about we elevate service to others above self-interest. And I've known about the code of ethics. I've looked through it. I had to do it at school or whatever, but I couldn't have told you what all was in there, honestly, And so that struck me about putting others above yourself and self-interest, and which was the foundation of what we were talking about with the ethics workshop about ego and getting caught in that. Is the root to having unethical behavior is losing yourself in your own conceptual, not falling out of it, getting caught in it. And this is no different. I mean, this is personal thinking. That's what that is. It's what we talk about in the principals community all the time. And it was just it became more and more clear to me that, when we experience the stress and the burnout and the struggles, is that we're caught in our personal thinking, and we're in our own self-interest in that time. And when you look at our clients, and to be of service with them is to help them see this, because when the clients are putting their self-interest aside, they become more of service to others. They get out of their fear, out of their fight and flight, out of their memories and the trauma that looks and feels so real. They start to question their world, and the humility in that makes it helps soften the realities that are just they're so strong and so frightening and compelling. And all I see as our role is helping people to see that their realities are not quite as real as they think. And it's an ongoing thing that we're doing as helpers. It's what we're trying to help parents with so they can support their children. It trickles down and with leadership and so on. So, I feel really fortunate to have been exposed to this and to be able to share. And I'll say one more piece too that I thought about a second ago was Dick and Bettinger is one of our mentors and close friends. And one of the things that he talked with us about one time was the difference between sharing and teaching. And we get into our teaching when we have information they don't, and we want to impart our wisdom onto them, right? So I'm going to tell you what I know, and this is going to help you, and you just wait and see, watch this, that kind of thing. And that's not what teaching is about, and that's not what true education is about, and that's not what this is about. And so sharing is, there's something that has brought light into my life, and I want to shed light on others. And from that space of sharing is egoless sharing. It's not, that's where true education happens, where true sharing is where you're seeing what makes sense to you. So when we're in that mindset, Jamie and I, when we're in that mindset, we have much more going for us in terms of our impact. And then sometimes when it falls flat and we look back and we go, okay, we were doing a lot of teaching, and we mean that in that other sense. Mm-hmm. We love teachers and educators, but that's not what we mean. So we were doing a lot of telling, I should say.
Yeah, telling. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get that. I mean, I've had mentoring with Dickin, and he shared that with me too, and that was really helpful. And I have to admit, this personality hates being told. So, unless you have permission to tell me, don't tell me.
Yeah. Isn't it funny that we like to tell?
Like that, right?
Yeah, we like to tell but not be told. Isn't that funny?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've got a couple of questions and comments here in the box. So anonymously, somebody's asking, is there a one-liner or a tagline that one could use to draw social workers and others into the psychology field to a workshop or training? Is there anything you've used?
Well, I'll say this. Really, I just kind of go undercover a little bit. So we say, we're doing a stress workshop, and we're going to understand the nature of stress. We're not going to do a stress management workshop. We're going to do a stress workshop, and mm-hmm. So it might be semantics to someone, but it really, because they're dealing with stress, and that's what they're up against. And you're saying you're going to do a stress workshop. So that gets people interested. And then we do what we said before. We try to bridge the gap. I could say, we did a webinar on resilience last week, and it was related to trauma and working with children in foster care and adoption, and talked about resilience. And but essentially, I'm pointing people to the nature of how we work and the nature of resilience. So, you could ask them, what are they dealing with? And then you teach them about how the understanding pertains to that. So I don't know. What do you think, Jamie?
Yeah, I used to worry a lot about that, and I don't know. I don't know how much it matters. I think it matters more just being really clear about what your message is when you do get them. Now, I think if of course I haven't had thousands of people signing up for a seminar either, so I can't think of a specific tagline, but I think sticking with words like service. I mean, service is that's the essence of this, and that's the essence of social work. And so anytime you're talking about doing something out of service, you're going to have social workers wanting to attend.
Right. See, that to me, sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, you said there was another question, but go ahead. I didn't.
No, I was going to say is this piece about meeting people where they are. I mean, I work with people on growing their businesses and practices, and for me, that is it. In terms of marketing, it really is meeting people where they are. So you've got to hear what's top of mind for them right now, and that's what you've just. And I think what Brock was saying earlier on about the why, people in your field, they really are coming from a place of service, as you've just been saying. So I'm sure it'd be something along those lines. So there's a rather long comment from Jonelle, who was actually a speaker for us a couple of days ago. So she said, so inspiring to hear your stories, as there is so much I can relate to in my own experience and insights, my communication with fellow care workers, and my experiences with clients and community. Many of your examples give me new, fresh ways to see, again, what we already know. Thank you so much. I loved your story of the card tricks creating laughter and engagement. I bring cookies into a weekly visit to a centre where there is one gentleman whose eyes are glazed over and rocks back and forth in his chair. And as soon as I pull the cookies out of my bag, his eyes light up, he jumps out of his chair and he comes towards me to get a couple of cookies. I haven't been able to reach him yet to engage in conversation, but it's always lovely to see his well-being rise a bit higher for that brief moment.
Well, that's great. Jonelle, you should learn how to make the cookie disappear right before he gets to it. That would be see how that goes. Let me know how that goes. I know, right?
Oh, and you've got
it was just an illusion. It wasn't a real cookie.
We've got a fan here, Clessia, saying she's loving this call. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, I've just noticed the time. I need to start wrapping up. See, we're having too much fun.
I thought this was a 2-hour call. Wait a minute.
No. You're kidding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I didn't read that email that I was supposed to read.
Oh, Terry's appeared on the wrong call. Terry, she's on the next one. She's my next guest.
Oh.
So, yeah, I'm really sorry, guys, but we've got to wrap up and get
well.
Yes, it's been just flown by. It's been wonderful.
Well, thank you for this, and we're so pleased to be a part of this, and love what the center's up to, and all this going on in the community, and just feel honored to be a part of it.
Yeah, we're really pleased that you could make it, and it's been a pleasure for me to meet you and get to know you.
Yeah, enjoyed it. Thank you.
Enjoyed it. Yeah, thank you.
Anybody has any questions or anything, they can just reach out to us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, your emails will go up on screen now as Charlotte does her business, if you like. And I'll read from my hard notes because I've got the wrong ones. So, just to wrap up as always.